He stopped her for no reason, talked down to her, searched her car without a warrant. To him, she was just another black woman who didn't belong in his neighborhood. What he didn't know was that she wasn't just anybody. She was the newly appointed captain of his precinct and his direct superior. And in a matter of minutes, the power he thought he had would come crashing down. It was a Monday morning in the small town of Fairfield, Georgia, a place where things rarely changed, and the police force liked it that way. Officer Mike Jennings had been with the department for nearly 15 years. To many in the town, he was a good cop. But to those who'd seen past the badge, and especially the people of color he frequently pulled over without reason, Mike was a bully in uniform, protected by silence. He believed the rules didn't really apply to him, that his badge was a shield, not just from danger but from accountability. And on this particular morning, he was bored and cruising through one of the wealthier neighborhoods when he saw something that, to him, didn't look quite right. A sleek, black Audi SUV came to a stop at a corner. Behind the wheel was a poised black woman, dressed sharply in a navy suit, sunglasses on, calm and composed. She looked like she was on her way to a meeting. But to Officer Jennings, she looked out of place. He flicked on his lights. The SUV pulled over without hesitation. The woman inside didn't appear nervous, only confused. When Mike approached, hand resting on his belt like he was ready for confrontation, she rolled down the window. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, voice firm but polite. He didn't answer at first, just stared at her like he was sizing her up. "License, registration, and proof of insurance," he snapped. She reached for her purse slowly, keeping her movements deliberate. Her hands trembled slightly, not from guilt, but from the exhausting familiarity of this scene. It wasn't her first time being profiled, but this time would be different. "May I ask why I was pulled over?" she said again. Mike scoffed. "You failed to make a full stop at the intersection. You looked distracted. Figured I'd check things out." She had stopped. She knew she had, but she also knew better than to argue on the side of the road. Mike glanced around the car and frowned at the briefcase on the passenger seat, the neatness of the interior, the scent of perfume that lingered. Everything about her presence defied the stereotype he wanted to box her into. "Mind stepping out of the vehicle?" he asked. "On what grounds?" she replied, eyebrows raised. He smirked. "You're acting nervous. It's routine." She looked at him for a long moment, then exhaled slowly and stepped out. He made her stand at the back of the SUV while he popped the trunk and began rifling through it. Then the glove compartment. Then under the seats. At no point did he find anything illegal, suspicious, or even out of place. And still he kept going. Cars drove by, some slowed. A few people stared, but no one stopped. "This car registered under your name?" he asked. "Yes." "And what do you do for a living, miss?" She handed him her ID. He looked at it but clearly didn't process the title written on top. "Danielle Carter," she said calmly. "And I work in law enforcement." He raised an eyebrow. "Dispatch?" he said with a chuckle. "Not quite." "Well, Miss Carter, let me give you a little advice. Next time you're driving through neighborhoods like this, make sure you're not giving cops a reason to get curious. We're just doing our job." She didn't flinch. Just stared at him. "Are you done, Officer Jennings?" He was taken aback for a moment, then nodded almost mockingly. "You're free to go." She stepped back into her car, closed the door gently, and drove off. But she wasn't heading to a meeting. She was heading straight to the precinct. What Mike didn't know, what he failed to read on the ID, was that Danielle Carter had been appointed just 3 days ago as interim captain of the Fairfield Police Department, pending a federal review into misconduct claims. The former captain had stepped down amid scandal, and the state had brought in Danielle from Atlanta to bring change. The kind of change men like Mike Jennings feared. She hadn't yet met the full staff. That was scheduled for noon. By 11:45 a.m., she stood outside the precinct conference room, watching the patrol officers file in. Mike was among them, chewing gum, chatting with another officer about some woman who got real mouthy this morning. He didn't notice her standing by the door, but when the deputy chief stepped up to the front and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your acting captain, Danielle Carter," his words landed like a thunderclap. Mike turned and froze. Danielle walked in with quiet confidence, the same sunglasses now tucked into her blazer, her ID clipped to her belt. Her gaze found Mike instantly. He went pale. And then she smiled, the kind of smile that isn't warmth, but warning. "Good afternoon, officers," she began. "Before we begin, I'd like to address an incident that happened just this morning. An officer stopped a black woman without cause, conducted a baseless search, and showed disrespect unbecoming of this uniform. That woman was me." The room fell silent. Mike looked like he wanted to vanish into his chair. Danielle continued, steady and controlled. "As of today, I will be reviewing every dash cam, every complaint, and every record in this department. The culture of intimidation, profiling, and unchecked authority ends now, and anyone who thinks otherwise is welcome to turn in their badge." She didn't name him. Not yet. But the message was unmistakable. Mike's smirk from earlier was gone, and his regret had just begun. You see, some people wear a badge thinking it gives them power. But the real power isn't in authority, it's in integrity. And when you disrespect the wrong person, you might just learn that the system you thought protected you can also expose you. If you're enjoying this story, take advantage and subscribe to the channel so you'll always receive new stories. By the end of that meeting, everyone in the room knew Captain Danielle Carter wasn't there to play politics. She was there to rebuild a department that had gone unchecked for too long. And Officer Mike Jennings had just placed himself at the top of her list. The days that followed were uncomfortable for Mike. He kept his head down, tried to act like nothing had happened, but there was no hiding from what he'd done, especially with every officer in the precinct aware of it. Danielle didn't confront him directly at first. She didn't need to. Her authority spoke louder than any threat. She quietly requested his dashcam footage from the traffic stop, reviewed it frame by frame. She asked internal affairs for his disciplinary file, which to no one's surprise was heavier than most. Several complaints from black drivers, 2 excessive force investigations that had been resolved internally. Danielle read every line. She took notes. She watched patterns unfold. At the same time, she held meetings with community leaders, listened to the people who had been ignored. She invited civilians into the precinct to speak about their experiences with local law enforcement. Many mentioned Mike by name. And then came the moment he feared. A formal summons landed on his desk. Internal review, mandatory attendance, not a request, a command from the captain. The hearing took place in a small conference room 2 weeks after the initial incident. Danielle sat at the head of the table, flanked by a representative from Internal Affairs and a city attorney. Mike walked in stiffly, eyes scanning the room for anyone who might sympathize with him. But sympathy was in short supply. "Officer Jennings," Danielle began, her voice cool and unwavering, "we're here today to review the events of June 3rd, as well as several past incidents that indicate a disturbing pattern of behavior." Mike tried to push back. He blamed protocol, claimed she was being dramatic, even said, "If I'd known who you were, I would have handled things differently." That was a mistake. Danielle leaned forward. "That's exactly the problem, officer," she said. "You treat people with respect only when they hold rank, but when they're just a black woman in a car, you humiliate them. You abuse your authority. That's not law enforcement. That's harassment." Mike fumbled for words. The room watched him crumble. He was suspended from duty immediately pending further investigation. But that wasn't the end. Danielle took things further. She initiated a complete audit of patrol reports over the last 5 years. She started a new community oversight committee, something the town had never had. Officers were now required to attend bias and de-escalation training. Monthly evaluations became standard. Some officers pushed back, others resigned. But many, especially the younger recruits, quietly supported her. They had joined the force to protect, not to intimidate. Danielle was giving them a chance to do things right. As for Mike, the State Oversight Board reviewed his record and determined that his pattern of racial profiling, coupled with dishonesty in several reports, made him unfit to serve. He lost his badge 6 weeks after that fateful stop. He didn't go quietly. He threatened to sue. He appeared on a local news channel claiming he was being targeted. But the evidence spoke louder than his denial. And the community, especially those who had once feared him, now felt empowered to speak out. One woman, an elderly schoolteacher named Mrs. Turner, approached Danielle outside a grocery store weeks later. "He pulled me over last year because I looked nervous driving at night," she said. "I didn't even bother filing a complaint because I thought no one would believe me." Danielle smiled gently. "They believe you now." As the months passed, Fairfield began to change. Slowly but meaningfully. Community police relations improved. The department hired new leadership that reflected the diversity of the town. Danielle remained a steady force, not loud, not flashy, but powerful. And the officers who once dismissed her, many grew to respect her, not just for her rank, but for her resolve, her fairness, and her refusal to be intimidated. One afternoon during a training session, a young officer raised his hand. "Captain Carter," he asked, "do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't spoken up that day?" She paused. "Every day," she said, "because silence is comfortable. But silence also allows injustice to grow. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is demand to be seen." Narrator, closing tone, powerful and reflective. Power doesn't come from a badge or a title. It comes from standing your ground when the world expects you to back down. Captain Danielle Carter didn't just show a racist cop who was boss. She showed an entire town what real leadership looks like. If you felt this story was worth hearing, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. More powerful stories are coming, stories that matter, that reveal, that inspire. Thanks for watching.